Now, I'd like to kick this webinar off with some preliminary remarks, and I wish to address 3 points. Firstly, the current human rights landscape. Secondly, the role of junior lawyers, and finally, some words of advice. Turning first to the human rights landscape. Simply put, human rights are essentially the rights and freedoms that are attached to us because of our humanity. Now, it's a somewhat controversial topic. Human rights are often discussed in the context of a violation, and it's easy to forget to celebrate the daily freedoms that we enjoy. In recent times, we've seen the emergence and also the re-emergence of relevant human rights concerns. WikiLeaks and the Cambridge Analytica scandal alarmed us about the need to safeguard our digital and privacy rights. With the Me Too movement, we witnessed a coup on the status quo. Women empowered themselves to challenge the status quo of bullying and harassment. Of course, related to women's rights is the right to equal pay and fair wages. There's still a gender disparity. Interns are still not being paid, particularly at institutions that profess to promote human rights. On the issue of racial justice, Black Lives Matter gained traction following tragic events that shocked the world's conscience. And here in the UK, the government recently published a race report that in essence denies the existence of institutional racism. On climate change, there's a clear relationship between climate change and human rights, and you'll hear more about this from the panel. So that's the landscape. What can we actually do about it? Which brings me to my second point on the role of junior lawyers. I believe that junior lawyers are well placed to be the best advocates to tackle some of the issues that we've outlined. And in today's webinar, you're certainly going to learn about how the panel are making their contributions to human rights. I think that we can perhaps start with the issues that affect us. For example, fighting against bullying and harassment in the legal profession. That's why here at the BNLF-JLD, we recently organized a training event on that issue. I believe that we can and we should work with the older advocates. For example, when I was assistant to counsel in the China Tribunal, which was led by Sir Geoffrey Nice QC, and of course in related roles I've had since then, I learned a great deal about the application of the law and certainly how to develop strategies to deal with politically sensitive human rights issues. I also believe that junior lawyers have a real passion to make a difference. Allied with wisdom and strategic litigation, passion can certainly accomplish a lot of things. It's the type of passion that we saw recently in the NSAS movement in Nigeria, where the youth, including junior lawyers, took a stand against corruption and police brutality. So whether you're young in age or young in spirit, if you care about human rights, the pursuit of justice, then you can make a difference. Which brings me now to my final words of advice. When I first moved to The Hague and was working at the United Nations, I noticed a distinct feeling of idealism. So I feel certainly that to be a human rights lawyer, therefore, is to be an idealist. You believe in bridging the gap between the promise of our legal ideals and the realities of justice. And this ideal was, of course, perfectly summed up in the UN Charter. It talked about we the peoples reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights and dignity and worth of the human person. So don't lose that idealism in a world of cynicism. Of course, sometimes as junior lawyers will need to have more lucrative jobs because, quite frankly, we don't wish to starve. But you can still make a difference and certainly be an advocate for a human rights agenda. Next, moral courage. We have to be willing to stand up for justice, even at risk of censure. But courage must always be accompanied with wisdom and strategy. We need to pick our fights carefully and study what worked in the past, for example, previous legal cases. And we have to also judge the mood of society. Finally, never lose sight of your principles. I am personally always saddened to learn about the role judges and lawyers played in the past to provide the legal architecture of some of the worst and greatest injustices of the past. I have in mind, of course, the Nazi and apartheid regimes. And by the way, I would strongly recommend you watch this movie called Trial at Nuremberg, which, in my mind, perfectly encapsulate the point that I'm trying to make. But I hope that everybody here who is joining certainly knows and will do better. And that's all I have to say. I shall now give the floor to our panel.